This is the Observations Podcast for, what is it, the 16th of July, 2023. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Dale Franks.
I'm Michael Wade.
And Michael, this is something I got to worry about, not you, but hope you've had a great week. Missed you last week. It's good to have you back.
Sorry about that.
In your, wow, you are super loud for some reason. I'm not sure why. But I will work on it. Anyway, it's been a week of not too much news, other than something really interesting happened this week. The Blaze had this conference of some kind, where part of the deal was that all of the Republican presidential candidates who showed up, and it was in Iowa, so they all showed up, except for Donald Trump, which we might talk about a little bit more later. But all these presidential candidates showed up in Iowa. All of them talked to Tucker Carlson. And as far as I can tell, he pretty much savaged them all during this conference. So here's just one of the stories that came out this week, or I love the headline: "Candidates self-destruct when Tucker Carlson asked some basic questions," and they really did. Like one of the questions he asked was of former Vice President Mike Pence, who is here, where he talked about, why are we so concerned with Ukraine? What about all the things that are happening that are horrible here in the United States? And Pence goes, well, that's not my concern.
Yeah, that was a rather dumb move.
I mean, he later came back and said that's not exactly what he meant. What he meant was he's not concerned with America being able to handle both a foreign crisis and some sort of domestic crisis as well. But that's not what he said.
I think that's a fair characterization of what he meant, but it doesn't matter. And this is politics. He's going to get savaged for that.
Yeah, he had his one shot.
And he doesn't have much of a chance anyway, so...
No, he doesn't. He's definitely not a favorite, but pretty interesting the way that turned out. He savaged. Well, we have a whole bunch of things. In fact, this article lists a whole bunch of this. Tucker Carlson talking about peace in the Ukraine war, and Tim Scott saying he didn't want to offer a premature peace, whatever that means. Why is Russia a bigger threat than Mexico with everything that's happening, the fentanyl, the unrestricted border crossings and all of that? Why are we so concerned? Are we seemingly more concerned with Russia than Mexico? And of course, we can walk and chew gum at the same time, which is kind of the same thing. Then there was the Asa Hutchinson. He's gone. He's definitely gone over the...
I don't even know why he's in this race, to be honest with you.
Yeah, neither do I. But, well, I think we can all say he isn't in this race. He isn't in this race at this point. So it was just, especially for Pence and for Asa Hutchinson. I mean, this is it. Their campaigns are over. I mean, there's no coming back from any of that. What I'm really interested in...
Not that there was much to gain.
Yeah, not that there was much to gain anyway. But the one guy who it might have been interesting if he had faced tough questions, I think we might have a debate about whether Tucker Carlson would have asked him any, is Donald Trump, who just didn't show up. Which, by the way, a lot of people who were there, a lot of people in Iowa were a little upset about that, saying he's acting like a king, just not showing up at things like all the other presidential candidates as if we owe him our vote.
Yeah, I don't know how much of a problem that's going to be for him, but I would think for the primary voters, that would be an issue. We have to keep in mind, though, that Iowa is not the be-all, end-all.
No, it's not.
And there have been several times, plenty of times, where someone won the Iowa primary and never got close to getting the nomination. So, I mean, so in some ways it may have been smart of Trump not to subject himself to that.
And I would point out Iowa caucus state, not a
Right.
primary
Yeah.
elections
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. It's a very, very unique type of primary election. Um, yeah. So I don't know that that necessarily hurts him. It's unusual because he typically likes to get up there and pound his chest and you know
Here,
elaborate on all his ideas.
yeah,
But
except I think he's. I don't know. I don't know how tough the questioning of Donald Trump would have been from Tucker Carlson. I don't know. It does seem to me like Trump is much more at home at rallies that he controls
mhm.
and that he controls the agenda.
It's his comedy show. Yeah,
Yeah, so I think he's more comfortable with that. He did go on with Maria Bartiromo this week, but it doesn't
yeah.
seem to me
And
that
she
she.
asked him some tough questions, actually.
Yeah, and he sort of handled it okay, I guess. So he might have handled Tucker well if Tucker was willing to ask him tough questions. But the fact that he doesn't show up here, and this comes the week after he just savaged uh, Iowa's governor,
Yeah,
who, by the way, won re-election by a very comfortable margin, just as Mike DeWine did in Ohio and Ron DeSantis in Florida. Um, he does seem, and it's primary season. We kind of expect this, but whew, he is going after his fellow Republicans with a vengeance.
it really is a strange game plan. Um, I mean, I suppose in one sense he's still feeling the burn from his personnel issues in his actual term as president, where he literally could not find good people except, or at least competent people, except for those who were kind of entrenched already, and they would turn on him. Um, I, and that's a personnel is policy, as the saying goes, and that makes it really difficult to get your policy into position and make it work if you can't find anybody competent enough to wrangle the bureaucracy and shove through your plans and ideas.
Yeah, and I have to wonder what a second Trump term, should there ever be one, what his personnel setup would be like. I mean,
I
who
think that's the biggest worry with him, quite frankly. It's not that his policies are bad, they were actually quite great. It's that he does not have the ability, I think, to get competent people into the positions where they can actually make something happen.
And after what he's done, I mean, I think we talked about this a couple of weeks ago when Kayleigh McEnany said something positive about Ron DeSantis on Fox News at her new Fox gig. He just unloaded on Kayleigh McEnany. Now, look, as far as the people who worked in his administration go, she was pretty darn loyal and pretty darn effective as his press spokesman. And he just threw her under the bus for saying nice things about Ron DeSantis. And this seems to
Yeah,
be
his demand for loyalty is
that's the thing.
narcissistic.
And I don't know who he gets to fill any position who really wants to work for him of any note now. I mean, he has gone through a lot of personnel, and every former secretary or whoever worked for him at one point or another, he just savages. I don't know. He's just burned a lot
And he
of bridges.
turns them against him as well. I mean, every one of these people, Omarosa, um, what's his face, who lasted for like a week.
Anthony Scaramucci.
Yeah, Scaramouche.
Yeah, I mean, in a week, he went from "I'm happy to be working for the Trump administration" to "this guy's a complete and total asshole, and I want him thrown out of Washington, driven out like some sort of poison troll." I mean, that's a pretty big turnaround in 5 days.
But it's just it's his thing, I guess. I mean, you're either completely loyal to him and he loves you to death, or you show any signs of thinking anything other than what he thinks. And you're like, oh, you're a loser. You need, you need to go.
Yeah, and yet you look at almost any of the polling, and I don't know how this is. We've been down this road before. We went
Yeah.
down this road in 2016, where we were sort of initially laughing at the idea of Donald Trump ever becoming president, and it happened. And so now when I look and I see him at hovering around 50% whenever there's polling done on the primaries, head to head with Trump or DeSantis or just a general thing in the field. I mean, it looks like he's got, at this stage, and again, 6 months prior to a single primary vote being cast or a single caucus being held, he's still got 50% of the Republican electorate behind him.
But that's also nationwide. That's not, and unless you're having state by state results, it's pretty meaningless. And the same goes for the general election, especially this far out. There's a lot of things that are going to happen between now and the first primary votes. So, yeah, I mean, of course he's out in the lead. He started earlier. He's got the name recognition. He's obviously a former president, and he's got a good solid base. I don't know if he has the ground game that some of the other candidates do. Certainly not to the extent that DeSantis does, but
he's never depended on that. He didn't depend on that in 2016. He didn't depend on it in 2020.
I'm not sure that's true. I think in 2016 he really did, but he kept it very targeted. He targeted the Rust Belt and Pennsylvania. They worked very hard to undermine the Democratic support in those particular states, and it worked. I don't know that. I mean, he's got plenty of money. He can run campaigns all over the country without much issue. What he brought in, like 52 million, or no, I think it was like 32 million or something for the second quarter.
Okay, well,
without
correct.
even really having to do too much.
Yeah, bringing in money is one thing. It's actually bringing in voters on election day that I wonder about. I mean, the traditional thing is I've got to have some sort of get out the vote effort on
Absolutely, yeah.
election.
And it's got to be on the ground.
And so you got to have people doing it. Now, from what I understand, DeSantis is doing this. But Trump...
We don't know how effectively yet, but yeah.
And we won't. And that's the thing.
Right.
Everything is speculation until people actually start casting ballots. And we just don't know. My initial assessment is that in general, Trump has about 30% of Republican primary voters who are going to vote for him. And unless you can overcome that, which is a plurality when you have a field of 8 people.
The more people that get into the race, the better off he is.
Yeah, he walks to the nomination at that point with 30% of the primary vote, especially because so many of the Republican states are, winner take all. So, you get 30% and somebody else gets 29%. Well, sorry, Charlie, your 29% doesn't get you a delegate. Everybody votes for the guy who got 30. I'm not certain that that's a great system, but I'm not certain that the Democrat supermajority or superdelegate system is great either.
That is just the weirdest thing. And I can't believe that Democratic voters put up with that.
Yeah, we don't really care what you want. We have enough. Right. We have enough delegates so that if it's any way close, the party will get to pick the nominee. Which, there are certainly arguments for and against that. I mean, the whole idea of primaries, which we've gotten so used to, is a relatively new innovation in American presidential politics. For the most part, presidential candidates were chosen at the candidate up until very recently in modern history. It wasn't until really the 60s and 70s we started worrying about these primary elections. Almost nobody had primaries prior to that. I mean, there were elections and you figured out who was going to go to the convention, but the real action was at the convention and anybody could win.
Right. Well, I mean, there was a lot of machine politics involved as well.
Well, yes, there was. That's why they wanted elections or presidential nominations to be done at the convention.
Right.
The primary system has kind of taken that away from them. The superdelegate on the Democratic side is a tool that allows the smoke-filled. Well, I don't know that on the Democrat side that many rooms are filled with smoke anymore. But
depends on what kind of smoke.
Okay, granted, but it does give them a chance. If it's close in any way, it does give them a chance to tilt the balance to one delegate or another. Indeed, that's largely Bernie Sanders' entire 2016 campaign.
Right.
I'm winning primaries and Hillary's going to win the nomination.
I'm still getting no votes. What's going on here?
Yeah, exactly. We all know what the deal was with that. And the Dems keep fiddling with that super delegate system to try to make it seem less pernicious. But I mean, it is what it is. On the Republican side, this winner-take-all thing, I think, sounds equally insane for different reasons. But I mean,
you got to choose somehow. I mean, and there needs to be some sort of, finality to it. If it starts getting too broken down and crazy, I mean, it just never ends.
Yeah, but what's really interesting is what seems to me to be the simplest method of doing this, which would be proportional delegate assignment. Neither party seems too keen on doing that.
Well, yeah, that's a parliamentary style, and I don't know.
It's
Americans aren't keen on that.
It's just weird, but in any event, we'll have to follow that.
Kind of like we won't use the metric system.
Yeah, exactly. We'll have to follow that. But although there are apparently some public officials who would like us to, I refer you to Anthony Blinken, the Secretary of State.
Oh my God, this moron.
Who waxed lyrical on Bastille Day, July 14th, about the commonalities between the American and French Revolution.
There were literally none.
Well, look, first of all, Thomas Jefferson, at least initially, although he later reconsidered his support for it, at least initially, Thomas Jefferson supported the French Revolution. So, I mean, we have to
he didn't know what it was about.
Yeah, we have to give some weight to the idea that there was at one point some commonality between the American Revolution and the French Revolution, although I think I would say that whatever commonality there was probably largely dissipated before the first 6 months of 1790 had passed. So there was a period of maybe about 8 months to a year where you might have said the French Revolution and the American Revolution have some commonality, but once this thing devolved into the Committee for Public Safety and the Directorate and then Napoleon, I think whatever the animating reasons behind the French Revolution might have been in July 14th, 1789, were largely dissipated by 1790.
There's actually an argument to be made that the French Revolution was brought about by the French king's support of the American Revolution, just to get back at those nasty beef eaters. They kind of emptied their treasury to help us fight the American Revolution.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, they went into serious debt to help beat what the French always referred to as the roast beefs.
I mean, and that was, it kind of led to a little bit of a crisis there.
Right. Well, Jay Cost's response to Secretary Blinken's comment seems appropriate. But yeah, look, I understand. We want to say nice things to the French about Bastille Day, because if it hadn't been for the French Revolution, I guess there would have been no Second Republic or Third Republic or Fourth Republic or Fifth Republic. Also, the Empire and also the return of the Bourbon Kings. And
Right, the 100 days.
yeah, French history is way more complicated in the 17 and 1800s than American history could possibly be.
It
I'm not
was
sure
not
you would
a
draw.
boring time.
Yeah, I'm not sure you can draw a straight line between 1789 and de Gaulle sweeping away the Fourth Republic and implementing the Fifth Republic in, what was it, 1963, 1964. So uh, you might have had a better statement than just that. That's just. But here's the thing. Here's what it tells me. The Secretary of State of the United States. Oh, and by the way, I would point out too, and I should have bookmarked it, and I didn't. Blinken, Bastille Day. I do want to pull this up. U.S. Department of State. That is not the. Well, great. Now I can't find the statement that he made. He actually came out with a. Well, I'm also calling him Slinken, so maybe
It's almost appropriate.
Blinken Bastille Day might have been a better one. But here is his official statement from the Department of State's website. This I think I can't find much wrong with. We cherish our relationship with France, fought side by side in 2 World Wars, created a more prosperous world. Our modern relationship is strong. We recognize French contributions to human rights and global security, including in Africa, the Middle East, and the Indo-Pacific. History mixed there on that account. But and then of course, we applaud French leadership on climate change, including the Paris. We certainly can't forget that. But best wishes to the people of France for a joyous National Day and a successful year. This, I think, there's much less to argue about than his Twitter statement, especially in that his Twitter statement largely exposes a historical ignorance that one would hope the United States Secretary of State would not have.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, it's absolutely true that France is our oldest ally. And that's because we were fighting the English at the time. So, I mean, there's no denying that. Who the French that we were allied with seemed to change quite rapidly over the course of about 60 years. But yeah, no, it's true. We do have a special relationship. Lafayette, obviously, is very special to us.
Also, an active participant in the French Revolution.
Yes. There are a great number of contributions from the French to, I mean, the Statue of Liberty. There has always been a bit of a special relationship there, but our revolutions weren't even remotely similar. Do we cast off ancien regime? Yes, but we didn't do it in our own.
We didn't do it because we thought King George was a tyrant who needed to be killed. We did it because he thought he was a tyrant who was not giving us the traditional liberties of English citizens, and we wanted to reclaim those liberties that people living in England had. Representation in Parliament and whatnot that they weren't willing to give us, and all we wanted was independence from what was essentially a foreign power.
Well, now we did threaten. I mean, in the precursor to the Declaration of Independence, a summary view written by Thomas Jefferson, he did basically say, "Look, throughout history, we get tired of you, stomping on us. We'll just go kill you. Okay, we've done this. People have been doing this forever, and that could happen. But we don't think this needs to happen." It's a mighty nice kingship you got there. It'd be a shame if something
Yeah,
happened to it.
the French, on the other hand, were pretty sure that they didn't want
Yeah, they
their
really
king.
were like, nah, we're done.
Anyway, I I don't know why I would be surprised that any
When
one
was?
of
Do
our
you remember when we
elites are
did?
that historically ignorant.
We did. We actually went through the entire French national anthem and like just how freaking bloody it is.
Oh yeah, I mean the best line of the French national anthem, the Marseillaise, ends with "Let us water our fields with their blood." Yes,
It was a little bit of a different idea.
yeah. I mean,
It
it's a beautiful national anthem, but
is actually.
basically it is. Hey, there's tyrants here. Their soldiers are slitting the throats of our women and children. Pick up a gun and let's go kill them and water our furrows with their blood. I mean, that's literally the whole first verse of the national anthem. Beautiful music, though, very stirring. When you hear the Marseillaise being played,
Oh, it's absolutely gorgeous.
it's absolutely wonderful. It's just that.
Matter of fact, we've got one of the ugliest national anthems.
Don't even
It's
get
an
me,
old like English drinking
yeah,
song.
don't even get me started on the U.S. national anthem. It's garbage. Our national anthem should be "America the Beautiful," I think, but that'll never happen.
I would say, what's the one that Kate Smith did? God Bless America.
Eh, maybe, but that's going to be
America the Beautiful is great. As
that's
long
going to be
as
a hard sell.
if it's the Ray Charles version, absolutely.
Yeah, well, the problem with "God Bless America" is that it's never going to get passed because
Oh God, yeah,
it's
right.
it's too gaudy. So you know, uh, the godliness of America the Beautiful is a little more subtle and tucked into the very end of the song. All right, so let's switch over from there to something that I'm still trying to unravel, and that is Ray Epps, who this week, 3 days ago, sued Fox News and Tucker Carlson for defamation on the statements that Tucker Carlson made that said that Ray Epps seems like he is a Fed, or at least a Fed-supported plant. And as part of his lawsuit, Ray Epps says, no, 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 no. I'm facing criminal charges for what happened on January 6th. Which doesn't seem to be what the FBI director said this week when talking to Congress, who refused to even address it. But I'm not sure that if Ray Epps isn't charged, he has a great case against Fox.
I'm not sure he has any case whatsoever, primarily because what was offered on Fox, as far as I'm aware, unless there are some specific hosts or commentary that said he is absolutely a plant, and even that's going to be iffy. Everything I've ever seen was mere opinion, and that's not actionable.
Well, here's the funny thing about that. After all the stuff that happened, we have videos, and have had for a long time, videos of Ray Epps on January 6th saying, we need to go to the Capitol. And of course, famously, everybody's yelling back, Fed, Fed, Fed. But we have videos of him actually there when the barricades were torn away in front of Congress and running past those barricades. And at the same time that happened, he was texting his nephew saying, we're here doing all this stuff and I helped orchestrate it.
Right.
And you have people like Brandon Straka, who never even went into the Capitol, who stood outside with a video camera, just shooting some video, and then left. And he ended up getting charged and convicted. And of course,
he did. He was convicted.
Yeah, they again, it was one of those unlawful parading things. He was held in pretrial confinement. He was sentenced, I believe, to time served. So, he got charged. All these other people got charged. And yet we have video of Ray Epps doing all of these things.
Explicitly saying, let's go into the Capitol. Let's go into the Capitol.
Yeah.
We got to march in there.
And here we are now. Let's see. 2 years later, more than 2 years later, and
2.5 years later.
Yeah, and he's never been charged. In fact, in Congress this week, they were grilling Director Wray of the FBI, saying, "Okay, look," and they were showing him the videos. Okay, why is Brandon Straka charged for just standing around with a video camera shooting video, and this guy who is literally helping people push the barricades away and invading Congress? Nobody has a word to say about him. Whether he's a Fed or not, I don't think we'll know. We'll probably never know. Even if he gets charged, do we really know whether or not he was an asset for the FBI? Presumably it would come out in discovery. But again, one notes that
discovery would be interesting.
Yeah, even though Ray Epps says he is facing criminal charges,
There's no actual.
There are no charges. I don't know what facing criminal charges means. It could just mean, technically I could be charged, but you haven't. So, there are, I think, legitimate questions that one can ask about Ray Epps's.
Is he suing them in New York? I don't know where the lawsuit was filed.
You know what? I don't know either. Ray Epps filed a defamation lawsuit against Fox News on July 12th. Doesn't seem to say where he filed that lawsuit. So I don't know. But I am looking, by the way, at a PolitiFact fact check on Ray Epps, because people have been making so many claims about Ray Epps that PolitiFact has decided to jump in and let us know what the facts are. Okay, well, let's take a look. Okay, fact check. This is the wild-eyed conspiracy claim. Ray Epps confessed to January 6th committee that he orchestrated the attack on the Capitol.
Right.
Okay, well, what PolitiFact says, that he told the committee that he walked to the Capitol, told others to do the same. He texted his nephew at one point and said, "I was in the front with a few others. I also orchestrated it." He explained to the committee that he used the word orchestrated out of pride, and he meant he helped people get there. He didn't know people were breaking into the building. How would he know that, even though, of course, we have video of him actually with others at the very front,
do that. Yeah,
breaking through the barricades. But hey, look, Ray Epps said he just helped people in, various ways.
Oh, you don't know where the Capitol is? Follow me. I'll take you down there.
It's straight up Pennsylvania Avenue. Really, it's easy to get there. It's just a straight shot.
See that big giant white building at the end of this mall?
Yeah. So, Fox's Carlson made a similar false claim that Epps confessed. Okay, Epps told the Congress that he did text his nephew and said, "I was in front. I also orchestrated it." We can have all sorts of conversations.
They rate that false.
Yeah, we can have all sorts of conversations about what orchestrated means, but for PolitiFact to come out and say, "Well, this is just false. This is just false." Fact check. Freedom of Information Act requests show a dozen phone calls between Ray Epps and the office of Speaker Pelosi. Rated false because neither private citizens nor members of Congress can have Freedom of Information Act requests.
That's not true. I know for a fact that members of Congress are subject to FOIA. Well, I missed the part where Nancy Pelosi said the claim was not true. So
yeah,
okay.
I didn't get there yet. But Nancy Pelosi says the claim is not true. Now look, for private citizens,
citizens, right?
You're exempt from FOIA. I don't believe members of Congress are in fact exempt from FOIA requests. Now there may be some technical thing in the law that says you can't go after Congress people for FOIA requests. But
There may be something tied to like the speech and debate clause,
yeah, perhaps.
which is like inviolate. But
But
no,
office
you're absolutely subject to FOIA.
but office administration, that doesn't fall into the speech and debate clause. Indeed,
That's exactly right.
that wouldn't cover an individual member. That would cover Congress as a whole and phone records maintained by Congress.
Right.
So, okay, this is an interesting fact check. This is technically true, I think, for some FOIA requests. I don't think it would be true for freedom
Not
of
for phone
information
calls.
requests for phone calls or for phone records. I mean, you're not even
Or
actually
for visitor logs, or for,
absolutely.
I mean, it's basically the same thing. So no, absolutely, that's not true.
Yeah, but forget about that because Pelosi spokesman said the claim wasn't true. Therefore, this is all a lie.
Well, that's good for us.
New January 6 revelations on Ray Epps and others undercut Tucker Carlson's FBI conspiracy theory. Okay, so Carlson asks, is Ray Epps a Fed or is he a federal asset? Because, a lot of people are being arrested, but not him. The one guy that we have on video saying, let's all storm the Capitol.
We have on video, right?
The one guy we have on video isn't charged. I'm kind of curious why that might be. What possible reason could it be? It can't be because the FBI is unaware of the existence of these videos because they're public. So if I can't think of any obvious explanations, well, actually, now that I think about it, I can come up with one obvious explanation as to why that may be true. Now, that's all speculation, of course, because we don't know one way or
Right.
another.
It's
However,
a reasonable conclusion.
the House...
And here's the thing about defamation is if you lay out a series of thoughts that lead you to this conclusion, it's obviously an opinion and it's based on these things, and that's just not punishable defamation or libel.
Well, I don't know, because we are told here that Epps testified under oath that he had no connections to the FBI or law enforcement, thus undercutting the conspiracy pushed by Tucker. Well, in other words, Epps says it isn't true. And by God, that's good enough for us.
And it was under oath.
And it was under oath. No one ever lies under oath. It's just never happened in the history of the world.
I do want to point out that they're very particular. This is a lawyer thing. No connections to the FBI or law enforcement. Well, there's lots of other federal entities that aren't considered law enforcement that he could have been working for. So that really does not that's it seems broader than it actually is. That's actually very narrow statement. Okay, maybe
CIA.
It wasn't FBI. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it could have been a lot of other DHS. DHS is not a law enforcement agency. It has people that certainly do enforce the law, but typically in working with the FBI or local police department or whatever. But that's really not as definitive as it might seem.
Yeah, well, but it continues. There's still no evidence that the FBI incited the January 6th riot, despite stories saying otherwise. So here we go. A Revolver article claiming Epps was an FBI agent because, we have him on video. He's made several comments. He was associated with Stuart Rhodes, who ran Oath Keepers, but he wasn't arrested. The Revolver article indicates that proves Epps is an FBI informant, and thus that if he is an FBI informant, he was employed by the FBI, he was inciting people to go to the Capitol. By extension, that would mean that the government was inciting the riot on January 6th. But of course, it provided no conclusive evidence that Epps worked for the FBI. Okay.
Again, worked for the FBI. I love how they do this limiting thing and don't at all they make it seem so expansive, and it's not. That's okay. So maybe he wasn't working for the FBI. That doesn't mean he wasn't working for another government agency. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but we're concentrating on the FBI now. What's really interesting, I think, that has been happening, because ever since Epps came out and said, what, I may be charged for this stuff, and I'm facing them.
Right.
I could go to jail for all of this, which proves, with my Captain Queen impersonation, with geometric logic, that I am not an FBI informant. Okay. Fine. And now what we're hearing from Democrats who have been yelling insurrection, insurrection for the past 2.5 years,
I did notice that.
are now calling it a riot.
Right.
Oh, well.
A disturbance, a protest,
all of a sudden,
gathering.
All of a sudden, now that Ray Epps is saying, I'm facing charges, and again, whatever that means, now all of a sudden, no, this was a riot. This was, it was an unfortunate circumstance, what they're not calling it directly. And I think it's just fascinating. And several people have pointed this out on social media and whatever, that it has been downgraded to a riot. So, they're talking about it on MSNBC, who've been yelling insurrection for years. And all of a sudden, now that they're talking about Ray Epps, well, this was a riot there. We don't really know whether Ray Epps, there's no direct evidence that he was involved in the riot. Oh, okay. Now that Ray Epps is in question, now it's a riot. Okay, we get you. Just funny.
Yeah, whatever they need to tell themselves to be to cover all their bases. And it is somewhat admirable of the left that they really don't worry about intellectual congruence or consistency. They can hold several different beliefs in their heads, even though they all contradict each other, and still think that they're true. It's kind of amazing, actually. I don't think I can do that.
No, I can't handle that level of cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
If I believe X is true, I can't simultaneously believe a thing that disproves X is also true.
Right.
That doesn't appear to be a problem for
that does not stop the left.
many of our friends on the left. They're able to hold two completely opposing ideas in their head at the same time, which is, I suppose, when you look at it in a certain way, quite an achievement.
It requires a cognitive ability to really wall off one part of the world from another part of the world, and I'm not capable of that. I can't do that. So, hats off to you.
I know that there was changed, and again, I'm trying to do this and talk at the same time. There was a great article there, but now I can't find it anymore. I really should have done it, but it was just an interesting look at a couple of different media organizations and how they were, saying insurrection, and now they're saying riot now that Ray Epps is.
Well, I think who was it? Tom, what's his face from Gravian, had a good little. He puts together those little videos of people all of a sudden changing their mind and whatever. I mean, whatever it is but he puts together those nice little compilations of the hypocrisy.
Yeah, well, there's plenty of it out there. By the way, one of our viewers says the Democrats in Congress were actually defending this guy during the hearing. He's almost certainly involved.
Yeah, during the J6 stuff.
Yeah, he's almost certainly involved with the government in some fashion. Now, I'm not entirely sure that your conclusion necessarily follows from the fact that Democrats were defending him. But again, I think the fact that Democrats were defending him during the J6 committee and doing so vociferously, I mean, it tells us
It gives you
something.
hints.
It gives
Yeah,
us it gives us a
definitely gives
hint
you a hint.
about something. It certainly causes us to want to speculate about something. I don't think we can say as a matter of absolute fact that it proves he's a government stooge, but
I mean, what did Kinzinger say about him? That he was one of the two Republicans on that whole committee.
right.
Um, Republicans. um, he said that, oh, he was just a confused soul who got caught up in the whole ordeal. And I was like, well, how is he then different than anybody else who was there?
Well, see, that's the
That's
thing.
not exactly distinguishing.
That's how riots occur. You know, it's.
Yes,
I mean, we've
mob
known.
mentality.
Yeah, we've known this since the publication of The Madness of Crowds. People will
Right.
subordinate their judgment to the judgment of a mob fairly easily, especially in a matter where it's fairly emotionally charged. And
Right.
the second
There's
that
some sense of righteousness.
yeah, and the second that you see somebody doing something, it liberates you to follow along and to do the same thing. And so what you end up with are just mobs who end up rampaging because, we're obviously justified. We're obviously angry. People are already breaking windows. I might as well break a couple myself. People give up their own individual sense of right and wrong, their own morality, and they just sort of crowdsource it to everyone else around them. Okay, maybe that's true of Ray Epps, but it would be true of any of the other 2 or 3,000 people who ended up becoming involved in that. That's how mobs work. That's
Right.
how riots happen.
So the question arises, why did he get special treatment? And you have grandmas behind bars. Why? There are people still awaiting trial who have been behind bars for 2.5 years.
And Ray Epps hasn't even been charged.
Yeah.
I don't understand. There are questions about why law enforcement hasn't charged this guy. And again, I think this also takes us back to the idea of how trustworthy are law enforcement organizations. How trustworthy is the FBI and the federal government when it comes to fairly applying the law? I think the answer that both of us have come up with is not very fair. So is this a case of the FBI just deciding that for whatever reason, maybe politically because he served some useful purpose for the Democrats with the J6 committee, maybe he cut some sort of political deal that we don't know about? I mean, there is much we don't know, and there is much we can speculate about without any real facts, other than the fact that he has not been charged 2 years into this. And the fact that he hasn't been charged.
It's quite obvious that he has been treated differently than other J6 defendants.
You have grannies from Oklahoma, from Omaha, who spent a year and a half in federal prison before they were charged with, unlawful parading. And this guy's been walking around free for 2.5 years, and nobody has said boo to the guy. Okay, why?
Right. There has to be an explanation. And the fact that one is not forthcoming is telling. I mean, it just raises a suspicion. And this has been the problem with the government for the past several years, is there is no transparency, there is no accountability, there is no honesty, quite frankly. It's foolish at this point to trust anything a government official tells you. And that doesn't matter if they're left, right, whatever.
And
it is absolutely foolish to trust them when they tell you this is the way it is.
Well, but Ray didn't even say that whenever he was being grilled this week in Congress. He fell back on the old tried and true. And look, as a matter of principle, it is largely true for him to be able to come out and say, well, look, I can't get into the details of individual charging decisions and what evidence is out there and who might or might not be charged, or what the
Yeah,
status is
yeah,
of an active
yeah.
investigation. Okay, that's true as far as that goes, but we have no indication that there is any active investigation of Ray Epps. It doesn't seem to have taken 2.5 years to charge. Again, I go back Brandon Straka, who doesn't appear to, I mean, he was on the Capitol grounds. So I suppose in that sense, we can say that he was in a restricted area and he could have been convicted for that. So yes, even though he was there
Trespass.
taking pictures, he was trespassing. We can get him on trespass. Not generally a felony, but okay. We'll still throw him in jail until we figure, because we got to figure this stuff out. These people are too dangerous apparently to walk the streets, but not Ray Epps, the one guy who we have on video saying we got to attack the Congress. And the fact that we have seen this two-tiered system of justice play itself out over Andrew McCabe, lied to the FBI, no jail time, still gets to keep his retirement. He had to quit his job 2 weeks early. That is the extent
James Comer.
of the price he paid. James Comey.
Hell, Anthony Fauci lied repeatedly to Congress.
Yes, we now have the receipts of the gain of function research that Anthony Fauci funded via Peter Daszak, that was undertaken at the Wuhan Center of Virology. Right. We now know what the grant numbers were.
He knew it.
We have his name on emails that he sent confirming these grants and the research they were doing. He flat out lied to Congress.
Yep.
So if anybody should be prosecuted, it was him. But no, we have to treat him like some sort of hero because he led us through the COVID wilderness.
Even that Kevin Kleinsmith guy, the only one caught up in any kind of criminal referral, well, not criminal referral, but at least in criminal consequences for falsifying the FISA warrant. He got a reprimand. I don't even know if he was fired. He should have lost his law license. Maybe he did. I don't know. But he also should have been put in freaking jail for lying on a FISA warrant. There's that is one of the. It's already so fraught with possible deviousness because it's secretive. It can go after Americans, and it's a totally parte court. You're not represented if you're the target. I mean, it's basically a star chamber, and this guy lied in order to target the Trump campaign, the Trump presidency at that time.
Yes, we now know that the FBI knew that the Steele dossier and all this stuff, they all knew it was a bunch of bullshit. The individual FBI agents who were in the investigation were telling the higher-ups at the J. Edgar Hoover building, this is all a bunch of crap. None of this is true. This is all just...
Even that asshole Struck knew this was a bunch of crap.
Yeah, they all knew it was false. And the higher-ups at the FBI said, yeah, take it to a FISA judge anyway. And they did it, and they lied straight up. FISA judge asked, okay, do we have any confirmation any of this stuff is true? Oh, yes, yeah, you trust me. This is this is a rabbit hole that goes deeper than you can even imagine, Judge. Without a FISA warrant, no telling what harm to national security will be done. And
then Kleinsmith had to lie about Carter Page having been a CIA asset in order to get the second or third iteration of the FISA warrant. I mean, that's a straight up felony. That guy should be in jail.
Yeah, but isn't.
Nope.
And none of the people who told them to do that, and James Comey is one of them, are in jail either. No, James Comey is now giving lectures about ethical leadership.
Oh, Jesus Christ! It's like fantasy world.
Yeah. So,
and that's the problem. Is we talk about the two-tiered system of justice. it's one thing if everybody was being punished, but some were punished more than others. It's another thing when some are punished and some just get off completely scot free. And it's absolutely ridiculous. And then we have this just came out, I think yesterday or the day before, um, where where Supreme Court says, yeah, no, that whole you want to give away or abolish student loans. Yeah, no, that's totally unconstitutional. You actually need some congressional authority to do that. Oh, well, we're going to do it anyway. It's like what, how, what what options are left? I mean, if they're not going to follow the law, what do we do?
Yeah, all of which brings us, roundabout to back to Ray Epps, which, if he hasn't been charged, we suspect that there's a reason why that's true. Because we can
Right.
see who has not been charged in the past and why. So forgive us if we draw conclusions based on the available facts. To get back to what you to get
There's
back,
a basket where people are charged. Oh, they're all of one side. Here's the basket of people who did the same shit and weren't charged, or even worse. Well, if Ray Epps fits in this basket, I mean, that's just a normal conclusion, right?
it's at least a logical inference to draw. So,
Yeah.
good luck with your lawsuit, although I do hope you get charged so that can help you get more money from Fox News. I just thought it was a little unseemly, all of the press cheerleading for Ray Epps this week, saying, aha, it's another Dominion lawsuit for Fox News. Yeah, well, not
Stupidest thing they
so,
did was settle that lawsuit. That
not
was so
so
dumb.
fast on that one. Well, I know, but, it might have been a lot more expensive if they I don't know why they settled that. Although my understanding is that Murdoch is not actively running the Fox empire the way he used to. It's largely in the hands of his
I
kids.
think it's
So,
his son, Lachlan.
yeah. So, well, we'll see how that goes. Um, Getting back to your point that you just made on student loan, I do know what Biden is thinking. He knows this isn't gonna. I mean, this is a cynical ploy from a guy who
Yeah.
knows that it's never going to happen. To just say, oh, no, 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 we will really give you your student loan relief. We're just going to do it in a different way because the court said we couldn't do it that way. But, I mean, that's not going to fly either.
No.
He must know this, and everyone in the Biden administration must know that this is just not going to happen. But it's too convenient of a political ploy to give up.
I mean, essentially, that's right. I mean, this is how they buy votes. And look, Democrats have been good about buying votes before, hell, since FDR. Um,
Well,
and
over
it
the last
works.
decade, the Republicans have learned a lot. I'll say that.
That's true. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, politics is politics, right? And eventually, when you see your opponents doing something that works, you're going to grab onto it.
Sure, if buying votes
Um,
is successful, then I guess you got to buy votes.
right. It's, maybe the cynical way to look at it, but I think the cynical way to look at politics is probably the most correct way to look at politics nowadays.
I think it goes far beyond cynical. I think you just have to assume that every major governing institution in this country is corrupt.
it's compromised in one way or another.
It's just like this last week, and it's such a minor thing. But there was a paper, I forget who it was, I'd have to go back and check it out, who came out with this statistic that, look, everybody says people are leaving California and New York and going to Florida, but more people are leaving Florida. Ha, ha, ha. And then the next day they came out and said, okay, well, not so fast. 600,000 people did move to Florida. So they have, in fact, had more.
Almost 700,000.
Yeah, they have in fact had more people move in to Florida than we said. So they
Yeah, because they're innumerate, don't understand charts, and can't read.
So basically, even though the exact opposite of what we claimed was true is true, still Florida's a pretty bad place.
Yeah.
So that was hilarious. What was even more hilarious is Jennifer Rubin at the Washington Post
Oh my God, what an idiot.
beclowning herself by going out 2 days later with the same story. Look at how bad things are in Florida.
It's debunked.
That we already knew that wasn't true, and she jumped onto it. So
Who the fuck is her editor?
what,
Who allowed her to print that?
do you remember back in the early 2000s when everybody was blogging? And we had the Rathergate thing, and I forget who the blogger was that said, "Hey,
It was Little Green Footballs.
yeah, Little Green Footballs," who came out,
Charles, what's his face? Yeah,
who later went a little nutty, but
he went way nutty.
who came out and said, "This letter from the Air Force that was delivered to George Bush in 1973 looks like it was written in Microsoft Word in Times New Roman."
Matter of fact, I just typed it up on my computer.
Which, didn't exist in 1973. And, he broke that story. And we were told...
God, that was absolutely... That put him on the map forever.
And one of the responses to that was, okay, sure, sometimes maybe these bloggers will get it right, but they're just, typing away in the basement of their mom's house. Even if they
That's how the whole PJ Media came about.
Yeah, even if in their pajamas. Even if they occasionally come in and get a gotcha. The fact is, most of these people don't know what they're talking about. And
they're not professionals like us.
In regular journalism, we have layers and layers of editors,
of fact checkers. Yeah.
To prevent us from, making these horrific mistakes. Well, the trouble is those layers and layers of fact checkers and editors didn't stop basically Dan Rather from burning down his career. And it doesn't appear to have stopped this week Jennifer Rubin from basically latching on to an already debunked claim, making the claim, and then, of course, the Washington Post having then to come back on the next day and say, yes. Okay, sure, it's the exact opposite of what Jen said.
In the first place?
What happened to all of your layers and layers of editors? Which, again, let's just assume that every major governmental and cultural institution is corrupt. Yeah. Let's just assume... And this goes back to what we talked about, or at least I talked about a few weeks ago. These are all book age elites who are so used to being in power that...
Yeah, we talked about this, the whole 1453 thing. Yeah,
they simply can't adjust to an environment in which they don't control all the narratives. And as a result, they've become fat, dumb, and lazy. Every institution is corrupt. So earlier you said, it's always wise to be cynical. No, I don't even think cynicism is an appropriate enough emotion or attitude to bring to the table. I think an understanding that if you are looking at almost any government institution, any major media institution, any major academic institution, you have to start off with the default position that they are almost irredeemably, perhaps certainly irredeemably corrupt. And if you approach things with that attitude, I think it gives you a much better idea about what's going on inside that institution.
Skepticism is becoming a more valuable instinct as time goes on. It's John Hagee used to talk about this all the time, and I believed him then, I believe him now, that it's very important to question sources of authority, especially when you should not, after all the examples that have come out over the past 10, 20 years of experts laying out their line, and this is what we're all going to live by. We know that they're full of shit. We've seen it happen over and over and over again.
Yeah, the death
Being skeptical is not going to hurt you. It's only going to help you.
Yeah, the death of expertise, as Tom Nichols calls it, is not a bunch of yahoos in Oklahoma who've decided you people with your fancy book learning don't have anything to teach me. It's people with fancy book learning failing publicly. And by the way,
right.
Our
And
elites have failed publicly since Vietnam.
And look, I've got plenty of fancy book learning on my own, as do you. So, this is not, I'm fighting fire with fire here. You know, I may not be an expert in biology or nuclear physics or climate or whatever, but can smell bullshit, just like anybody else can.
Yes, one of the things about having an advanced degree is, especially if it's from a decent institution, is that it does teach you how to think skeptically about arguments that you are being presented with, whether it happens to be in a scientific paper in a peer-reviewed journal, or whether it happens to be a presentation by a colleague at a conference. The fact is, you do receive at a decent institution some level of training that enables you to listen judiciously and then conclude, well, this is bullshit.
Yeah. I mean, at some point, we're all Missourians,
show me. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it sounds interesting. I find a lot of disbelief in there. So, okay, I'm willing to be taught, but show it to me. I want to see some proof.
And I think I take it a step further when I listen to some claims being made to think, that sounds too good / convenient / partisan to be true. So I'd want to look at that claim a bit further. And I think I think you have to. The problem is that how do we know that these claims aren't true? Let's go back just to 2 years.
And that's very hard to do if you don't have the expertise.
Yeah.
And when they couch it in expertise, hey, look, I'm an expert. I know all this stuff. Okay, but do you? Because how would I know that?
Well, this is, when we talk about skeptical questioning, I would go back to COVID. Okay, lab leak clearly never happened. You don't need to worry your pretty little head about wondering why there were no intermediary cross-species infections like we saw back in 2000 with the bird flu. You don't know enough about epidemiology to make those decisions. You just have to listen to us. And we're going to tell you that this is a naturally occurring thing that came from bad at cross-species. The fact that it didn't operate like any other cross-species infection that we've ever studied, well, you're some kind of conspiracy theorist. You got to believe me here. I mean, why are you so racist against Chinese? Or
that was the one that never made any sense to me.
Or hey, if you don't get these vaccinations, you can pass this disease to other people, and it's your fault. You're the reason why we can't have nice things. We can't get past COVID because you refuse to be vaccinated. Because you were vaccinated, we could stop this transmission thing in its tracks. They were telling
how long were we told that?
They were telling us this.
We were told for like a year.
Yeah, while they knew that it had never even been tested against transmission. So they had no data whatsoever that could support the fact that the COVID vaccine prevented transmission. And then, of course,
when people... It's not a vaccine.
And then, of course,
it's
when
not
people...
a vaccine.
Yeah.
They actually changed the definition of vaccine on the CDC website just so that this bullshit shot would fit within the parameters. It's not a vaccine. It was never a vaccine. Prophylactic, an effective prophylactic. Yeah, I'm good with that. But it's not a vaccine.
Yeah, and
it was never a vaccine.
Once you've told us that you have to get vaccinated or transmission can't be stopped, and you could push that argument for a while until people who were vaccinated kept getting COVID repeatedly.
It's like the whole reefer madness thing.
Okay, so
when that came back out, it came out in the 60s, and you smoke, ganja, weed, marijuana, you're gonna go crazy and go off on a killing spree. Yeah. And then people just kept doing it, and they're like, yeah, no, that's not gonna happen.
Yeah, first of all, I'm too hungry and too relaxed to kill anybody at the moment. But the
Poor Shaggy.
but you know they pushed this on us for months and used it as a reason to try to force a vaccine mandate on the American people. And then when
And for
people,
what purpose?
yeah,
And what was the fucking purpose? The only purpose was to see. They had to come up with a talisman, the mask, to see how many people would comply. This was nothing more than an absolute government takeover of our civil liberties, of our rights, and our ability to live our lives on our own. And they wanted to see how many people would comply just because they could scare them into it.
and
And I guarantee you, they're going to do the same goddamn thing in a year. They're going to declare a climate emergency, and they're going to say we all have to start doing this. We can't drive here. We can't do that. We can't use these appliances. Blah blah blah. They are going to try to control our lives, make everybody as miserable and dependent on the federal government as possible. But they've already shown us this is what they're going to do.
yes, they have shown us that it's all about what they're going to do, and indeed, all of these mandates that we are now starting to see, both from Europe, from the federal government, although the federal government is calling it a target, not a mandate. This whole idea that we're going to have all these electric cars. We're not going to be able to charge them. We're not going to have an electric grid that supports it. It's not about saving Johnny Polar Bear. It's about restricting Americans' access to transportation, about making it impossible for us to go anywhere without being dependent on public transit. And by the way, this is not just some wild ass conspiracy theory. Some of the
WEF talks about this all the time.
Yeah, they're saying publicly, yeah, that's exactly why we're doing it. We can use this climate crisis. I'm not sure what the crisis is, but again, we're just going to call it a crisis, and then we can impose regulations that over the next 10 or 15 years will basically force you to not have private transportation. Yeah. Which, by the way, in a country like the United States, where
it's just not possible.
Public transportation, that's the thing. It is not possible in New York City, where you have 10 million people stuck inside about 20 square miles. Yeah, you can have a great public transit system in that city. But this is not like Europe, where if I want to go from, Frankfurt to Dortmund, I can just jump on a train and zip over there because Frankfurt and Dortmund are, 150 miles apart max. If I want to just jump on a train to zip over to Austin from Chicago, I'm screwed.
Yeah.
Because it's a
and even in Europe,
1,500-mile train journey
down to the Loire Valley, to the Bordeaux region. You're not doing that by public transport. I mean, you can do part of the way, but the rest of it's going to have to be by private transport. The between the big cities, they're all fairly close to one another. But you can't reach. Hell, you can't reach the eastern parts of Poland by public transportation alone, much less the Czech Republic, Romania, even Austria is the same way. I mean, they're not. Spain? Are you kidding me? You can go to a lot of places in Spain, to all the big places, but you're not going to the Basque region. Hell no.
Yeah, but again, we don't want you to go to the Basque region. We don't want you to go. If you live in Texas, we don't want you to go to the Grand Canyon because you're just going to waste a whole bunch of carbon going to the Grand Canyon. But, like you said at the WEF, they want an end to private car ownership. We know that they do because
they said so.
It. They say so. I mean, it's not a conspiracy theory when they are publicly saying what they are going to do. And so when you go through all of this, it's clearly not to, as this guy says, the intent is not necessarily to force people into an electric vehicle. The intent is to collapse our freedom of movement and force us to use mass transit.
That's better.
Yeah. And then you had John Kerry this week.
Oh God, what a fucking asshole! I can't stand that motherfucker.
Okay, so the question, why do you use a private jet to run around all the
I
time?
don't own a private jet.
First of all, let's be clear. I do not own a private jet. Okay, but
Oh, except for that Heinz
the Heinz family
one
does.
that I.
You're married into that family, so even though you don't own the jet, you apparently get a chance. Here you are, stepping off the staircase on it. You apparently get to use it routinely. I think the question of whose name is on the pink slip is not the thrust of our question. And so, just say,
Yeah, can I borrow it? I got a place good next weekend.
yeah, exactly. So, in any event, every institution is corrupt. Act accordingly.
I think it's literally the wisest course of action. That you shouldn't trust any institution. Period. Question them and make them spell out their rules. Make them spell out what their intentions are. And I don't care if it's a court, if it's an administrative unit, if it's your local uh, representative, make them spell it out, because you're not going to get any closer to the truth by assuming that they work in your interest. They do not.
They work in their interest. Of course, the problem with questioning them skeptically is that they don't want to be questioned. And skeptical questioning is equated directly with, misinformation and disinformation, which is probably currently the biggest threat to our liberty of freedom of speech. The very idea that misinformation and
this
disinformation
was spelled out. Yeah, this was
attacked.
spelled out. What's his face? Buchanan. He was a GMU economist. Actually, he wasn't even an economist, but he did win, I believe, a Nobel Prize for economics on public choice theory. And it essentially says that just because they work supposedly for the public does not mean they don't have private interests. And they will work for those private interests over and above any public, mandate they may have. And he did this through statistics, econometrics. He spelled it out really well, enough to get like a Nobel Prize in economics. And public choice theory is actually held in very well regard by most economists who deal with public entities and that sort of stuff. And that's just the fact of the matter, is that we're all individuals. We all have our own private interests. You give us a fiefdom, we're going to use that fiefdom to our, anybody who has ever dealt with an HOA knows this.
Yeah, exactly.
It's always the people who want, flowers in every yard and every paint, every fence to be white and all the doors to be green. They're the people who get themselves elected to those boards and then ride roughshod over everybody else.
All right. Well, with that in mind, and we are sort of running out of time, there are two things I wanted to cover fairly quickly with you. One of them is rather amusing, and it's this headline off the New York Post. As you may or may not know, there is a serial killer. They found 11 bodies on Gilgo Beach, all women, all presumably prostitutes.
I had never heard of this guy before, by the way, but
yeah, well, I remember back in
fascinating.
I do remember back in 2010 when they found these 4 bodies in the space of about a week on this beach. And they were kind of stumped as to who it might be, but clearly there was a serial killer operating. It's taken, that was 2010, so it's taken 13 years.
That's a great ad for that for that headline.
Yeah, that's a great ad. But in any event, they found the guy. They were able to link him through DNA. got 11 murders. They're charging him currently on 4. He's been arrested. They issued a search warrant at his house. And scores of guns confiscated from the suspected Gilgo Beach serial killer.
But he didn't kill any of them with a gun.
Who had 92 legal permits, all of which is fascinating. But I think we have to consider the fact that he was mostly a law-abiding gun owner. He complied with all of the laws of New York State. He had 92 legal permits for his guns. He was apparently quite law-abiding in that. Sure, he killed about 11 hookers, but he didn't shoot them. So
that's the funny thing. It's like, what is the gun thing?
Yeah. So what is the point of this story? Indeed, he had.
You know what the point is.
He had a very large safe in which guns were kept. Okay, well, he sounds like a very responsible fella.
A responsible gun owner.
In fact, he's responsible for a lot more than just gun ownership. But, okay, fine.
Well, as far as we know, let's not like.
Yeah, as far as we know,
I don't know. I don't know what the evidence is, and I saw the story.
They've got DNA evidence on the guy They got DNA evidence on the guy apparently.
Apparently.
Yeah, but I'm most amused.
We just got done with saying we're going to be skeptical.
Yeah, I'm most amused by the second to last paragraph of the story. Cops have also confiscated cat food, a cat scratching pole, a framed picture, and a bookcase. Okay.
Oh, he's guilty.
Well,
he is so guilty.
We are so close to solving this thing, I can't even begin to tell you. And by the way, the fact that he had cat food and a cat scratching pole is every bit as relevant to his complicity in this murder as the fact that he was a legal gun owner. Both of these facts are of the same importance. Legal. I mean, as far as I can tell, he went out of his way not to kill people with guns. So I just thought it was fascinating, this entire story. And this is, by the way, from the New York Post, who one would assume would be,
The New York Post is not explicitly
conservative. I get that.
Conservative. It's New York conservative.
They tend to be on the right side of the culture war, though.
Right. They're closer to a European conservative paper, I would say.
But
maybe
anyway,
like the Telegraph.
Interesting story there, but it tells us nothing about this guy. It's just he has scary guns, and that's all we're supposed. And by the way,
monster.
What other proof do we need that this guy is guilty? He had a whole bunch of guns. That's pretty sketchy. Okay, but that's just a weird sort of cultural.
I hope they don't go look up my uncle who lives out there.
Yeah, I'm always amused whenever I see an article where they talk about, well, this person had a stockpile of guns or a cache of guns, 3, and a stockpile of ammunition, 500 rounds, which makes me ask. What number of rounds does a stockpile become an armory? I'm asking for a friend. Because 500 rounds.
500 rounds, that's like, I don't know, 2 good weekends.
Yeah, that's 2 practice sessions, if that. Okay, one last thing I wanted to give you a chance to talk about because we didn't get a chance to talk about it last week. And
I'm going to be challenged now. Yes, yeah. Oh God,
it's this whole thing about Sound of Freedom, and I think, and I meant to show this last week, and I don't think I did, but since you're with me here now, and this is a topic in which you also have some interest, I wanted to bring this up. It's a QAnon adjacent thriller, and by the way, that terminology super important because the movie has nothing to do with QAnon. Movie doesn't mention it. Movie doesn't make any reference.
Based off a true story.
Yeah, it's it's based on a true story. Look, it's Hollywood, so even with the best intentions of everyone involved, I see based on a true story, and I do know that some dramatic license
Sure,
has
absolutely.
been taken. I was just fascinated by the fact that so much of the mainstream media basically wanted to put out a message, and the message was, don't go see this movie because the people associated with it may be linked in some way, and the movie itself may be linked in some way to QAnon. And by the way, we have to use QAnon because, crazy conspiracy theory people, you don't want to get caught up in that crowd. So it was an interesting cultural message that got sent, making this explicit link from QAnon to a child trafficking movie. As if, I don't know, is the point that child trafficking doesn't exist? Is it the point that children aren't taken from their homes and
Yeah,
raped
that's
or
the
forced?
part I didn't understand. Look, I
Why
don't
not
know
just look at
much.
the movie on its own merits? If I had to
Right.
look at every single person involved with every piece of media that was ever produced, there would be a whole raft of music and movies and television and
Oh, God
YouTube
help me
videos that
if
I could
we had
never
to do
watch.
that. If we were to review movies for their Marxist content, I don't think that we would ever stop. I think it would just be an unending bitter fest, and I don't want to do that. I, what I don't understand is that it has nothing to do with QAnon, and I don't. Here's the other weird thing. I literally know almost nothing about QAnon. I know it had something to do with child trafficking and Democrats and a pizza parlor. That's all I know. Like, I don't know any. I have a lot of right wing friends. I've never heard them bring up QAnon. I've never heard them talk about QAnon. I literally don't know what QAnon is or how it became such a big thing. Um, I know there was that idiot who like literally raided a pizza parlor.
Yeah, Comet
Other than that,
Pizza
I
in
mean, that's
Washington,
about as
D.C.
much as I know. In the same moment, I am absolutely aware, and I have been for many, many years, as some of y'all may remember, I used to work with kids, some who had been trafficked, and I'm well aware of the human trafficking issues, child trafficking issues. They are real, they are horrible, and they do exist all throughout the world, including here in America. It's not good stuff. It's really unsavory stuff.
Here's the question that I have that I'm now glad that I have you so I can ask this question. And it's something I didn't think of until after the podcast last week, which is, why do you think, I mean, as one of the reviewers, indeed the reviewer for Variety, of all the places to give Sound of Freedom a positive review, the Hollywood Mouthpiece newspaper would not have been the one that I would have expected to do, and yet it did. And one of the things that he pointed out in that paper is that, you know what, we see a lot of movies about drug trafficking. We see a lot of movies about arms trafficking and all this. But boy, when it comes to child trafficking, we don't see a lot of stuff about that, or just human trafficking in general. Although I suppose the Liam Neeson movie Taken could be construed as a human
Sort of.
trafficking movie. But we don't examine this. Over and above that, something that occurred to me, and I talked about it a little bit last week in the podcast, but one of the things that hit me about what one of the reasons might be is that the federal government spends so much money on drug interdiction. That seems to be the one thing that we just will not stand is drug interdiction. The amount of money that we're
Except for fentanyl.
Yeah, but the amount of money that we're spending on child trafficking investigation and child trafficking or human trafficking in general is a drop in the bucket.
Well, especially when you hear the border control officers talk about it, like that's the worst thing, and that's the thing that they're most concerned about, and yet they get the least help with.
And why is that? And it occurred to me, look, if I am a cop, and by the way, this is true whether you're just some Yahoo County sheriff in the middle of Kansas or whether you are the DEA. One of the tools that I have is civil asset forfeiture.
Hmm.
You know, if I go after you, if I think you're a drug
Which I
dealer,
disagree with, but
yeah, but again, whether philosophically whether it's right or wrong,
right. No,
that's
I
off the
get you. I'm
table
with
at the
you.
moment. The reality is, if I can link you to drug dealing, I can take your house, I can take your car, I can take every penny that's in your bank account, and I can auction your house and car, and I can keep all that money. And you are
Hmm.
just SOL, my friend. You are done. And so if I make a drug bust and I find you in a nice car with, you know, 5 ounces of marijuana, hey, you know what? You must be a dealer. This car must be the result of trafficking operations. Therefore, I can just confiscate your car. I can sell it, and and by the way, who gets that money? I do. My agency gets that money. We have built a asset confiscation system that enables these agencies to place that money unbudgeted. It's a windfall. And I wonder, do we spend so much time on drug trafficking because we have the ability to make money off of it and turn it into kind of a quasi business if we go after basically anything to do with drugs? Whereas and by the way, if drug people have assets, right? If you go after a drug kingpin, he may have millions in the bank. He may have a $5 or $6 million
Cars,
house,
houses.
cars, the whole
Yeah.
9 yards. I mean, you have assets you can attach. I'm not sure the same is true for human trafficking people. Whether you could find them, whether the people you could catch would be the people
So
who
your question is,
are we incentivizing ignoring child trafficking by just
because it
making it
doesn't bring
so,
in
yeah,
enough revenue for the government?
yeah, it's financially it's a financial incentive to everyone from local law enforcement all the way to federal government
Yep.
agencies
That no,
to
no,
seize
I
assets.
get it. Um, so I can give you another example. In tax law, international tax law and partnership law are probably two of the most convoluted.
Uh oh, you're frozen on my screen. I think I've lost you. Oh wait, now,
Am I still here?
oh, now you're back. Now you're back. So
Okay,
I
okay.
lost you at
Sorry.
the most convoluted.
Okay, so uh, international tax law and uh, partnership law are two of the most convoluted, most impossible to understand types of law, uh, uh, tax law. And because there are no real lobbies to interdict and try to change the laws, they become very arcane and dense and almost impossible. Um, this has killed off partnerships. Nobody almost nobody. I don't know of anybody that does partnerships anymore. Um, Tax law is very weird, especially international tax law. There's a thing called transfer pricing where, you make widgets in England, you send them to Jamaica, which is a low tax state, and then you finish them mostly, but then you add a wheel or something in the United States so that you can get the benefit of that low tax Jamaican manufacturing. This is one of the most policed, highly um, suspicious activities. One of the ones that the IRS spends a great deal of time and money on policing because it yields them the most benefits. This has been going on for 50 years. Um, and again, because there's no real lobby to change it. that's exactly what happens. I mean, they go to where the money is. The same thing goes for antitrust law, uh, for the FTC. Um, any of these government agencies, they're not going to waste their times on petty ante stuff. They go to where they can get the biggest bang for the buck. So it does not surprise me in the least that the scenario you brought up would be the case because yes, absolutely. The government will go for where it gets the greatest margin of recovery for effort expended. Like any rational person would, quite frankly. I mean that doesn't make it a bad thing. It's just
There are other bad things, though, that are probably. Look, do I want to spend a lot of time and money going after people who, for whatever reason, voluntarily use illegal drugs?
right.
Or go after people who actually enslave other human beings. I mean, irrespective of whatever the financial outcomes are of undertaking those two investigations, there does seem to me to be a clear and compelling difference
There is an
between the two.
undervaluation of human life.
Exactly.
I think that's explicit and clear. Um, I mean, I know we differ on this, but that's kind of how I look at abortion law. Um, there's an undervaluation of what people are worth and the value of human life. We have strayed so far from those Judeo-Christian um, underpinnings of the Western culture that we're now at a very stark um, sort of pragmatic Benthamite uh, evaluation of what's worth what.
You know, I can't help but compare the way that we deal with human trafficking today with the way that the British dealt with the slave trade in the 19th century. Once the British had decided, yeah, this slavery thing, not good, we're going to stop it,
And
they
they
stopped it.
almost literally eradicated it in like what, 10 years?
Yeah, and then they maintained a Royal Navy squadron off the coast of Africa for 50 years. And when I say off the coast of Africa, I also mean on the coast of Africa, launching reprisal raids inland with Royal Marines and sailors. When the Brits decided that slavery, the human trafficking of the 19th century, was no longer acceptable, they
They put their foot down.
they put their foot down. They committed a substantial bit of their national prestige into ending the African slave trade, which, by the way,
And this was in
they
what, the
did.
1830s.
Yeah,
I
after
mean,
from the 1830s to the 1870s,
yeah,
if you went to Africa for the purpose of trying to grab slaves, there was
right.
an excellent chance that you would be stopped, boarded by the British, and quickly hung.
Yeah.
They basically were not playing games.
I mean, and they were going into the interior at that
Oh
time
yeah,
too.
yeah, they were dropping off Marines and going on punitive expeditions to stop this stuff. We do not have that same level of commitment
When it comes
that,
to child trafficking,
or
absolutely.
any
I
kind of
agree.
human trafficking. I mean, by almost
Right.
any,
Yeah. No, there's still sex trafficking,
yeah,
which is typically young women.
by
Well,
almost,
it's also young
yeah,
boys.
but by almost any measure, there are probably more slaves in the world today than
Than
there were in
at any time
1865.
in history.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And we know where they are, and we know where they come from, and we know who buys them. And it's mostly in the Middle East, um, the Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, uh, the stands, um, and they come from, you know, as far away as Vietnam, uh, Taiwan. They come from southern Africa, southeastern Africa, and northern eastern Africa.
Okay, but look, I accept the fact that it's just not going to be possible either politically or through an act of will to go after sovereign nations who are allowing slavery in their countries. What we can do, because
We can end the transport.
it's comforting, however, to think, well, this is a Saudi problem or a Middle Eastern problem, but it's not, because we have the same problems here in the United States. It's much more covert, and
There's a
much
lot
more
of
hidden.
child trafficking in these United States that people don't even understand.
I mean, forget
And
the
I've seen it
Saudis.
face to face.
Yeah, forget the Saudis. Why aren't we doing anything about it here?
Absolutely. I absolutely agree. And one of the things with this unprotected border, this is increasing.
Yes, if you
It's
can't secure the
actually
border,
getting
you
worse.
cannot prevent cross-border child trafficking.
Right.
And of the, as we talked about last week, Chip Roy in the House in their committee meeting said there's 85,000 kids that DHS
We don't
tagged
even know where they are.
that we don't know where they are. What's happening? Are these kids being trafficked? Who's looking after them? We don't know. And the DHS secretary was like, yeah, well,
This touches on a big uh, button for me because, like I said, I worked with kids for a long time. A lot of them were sexually abused. Uh, it it drives me crazy that we don't protect these kids more. And then when I see this crap going on I don't want to spin off into this right now. I know we're getting ready to end, but when I see this crap with the grooming going on in public grade schools, um,
yeah. Look,
I just want to punch somebody.
when it comes to this, and by the way, I don't know if you remember, but like a year or so ago, it became a bad thing to even say like, okay, groomer on Twitter for people who were, saying, oh, we should be teaching children, 5-year-olds about oral sex and all of this other stuff. I don't even understand where the impetus from that comes. People talk about QAnon being this crazy conspiracy theory, right? About how, oh yeah, people on the, politics, they're sexually molesting children, blah, 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 blah. Okay, but if you're actually in support of teaching 5-year-olds about oral sex and things like that, look, I gotta wonder about some stuff. Again, it's just like Ray Epps. I gotta wonder why you're not being arrested. I gotta wonder why you think or elementary
Nice
school
quote.
kids have to be
was a
taught
great
about sex. And with that, we will close. Michael, as
That
always,
was the best circle we've ever done.
We-
That was awesome.
we close the
Well
circle.
done, Dale.
Let's pat ourselves on the back. Have a great week, Michael. We'll talk to you
All
next
right,
week.
you too.
You have been listening to the Observations Podcast for the 16th of July, 2023. As always, appreciate the fact that you are listening and hope you'll be with us again next time. Until then, have a great week. We'll talk to you next time. So long.